You know, we often talk about what makes us suffer, right? Stress, anger, that constant wanting of things. But what if there was one single source, a fundamental root that all of this grows from? Well, according to ancient Pali texts, there is, and it has a name, Moha. In this explainer, we're going to unpack this incredibly powerful concept and see why it's considered the ultimate root of pretty much all our troubles. So, to really get a handle on Moha, first, we need to see the company it keeps. See, it doesn't operate alone. It's actually part of a trio of mental states known as the akusila mulani, or the unwholesome roots. Think of these as the three primary pollutants of the mind. All right, what's so cool about this slide is how clearly it lays out the basic forces behind our behavior. On one side, you have the unwholesome roots, lobha, which is greed or attachment, dosa, which is hatred and aversion, and our main topic, moha, delusion. And on the other side, they're perfect opposites, the wholesome roots, alobha, generosity, adoso, kindness, and amoho, which is wisdom. The texts are super clear that every single thing we do, skillful or unskillful, grows from one of these two sets. So we've got this trio, greed, hatred, and delusion. But are they all created equal? Or is one of them kind of the boss, the one that enables the other two? The texts definitely suggest there's a hierarchy here. So the big question is, which one is it? And that brings us right to the heart of it. The sources all point to one of these roots as being the primary one, the soil from which the others can just sprout up. So let's really get into what moha is. So, moha gets translated as delusion, bewilderment, or ignorance. But this isn't ignorance like not knowing a trivia answer. It's a much deeper, more fundamental confusion about how things really are. It's like being convinced that a fleeting pleasure is going to bring you lasting happiness. That's the kind of delusion we're talking about. And it's the primary root, because without this basic confusion, greed and hatred have a really hard time taking hold. And don't think of this as some quiet, passive state. The texts describe its effect as very, very active. This quote here says, "Moho chittapakapono," delusion agitates the mind. It literally shakes it up. It causes turmoil. Imagine a glass of water with silt at the bottom. Moha is the force that's constantly shaking it, never letting the water become clear. That's what it does to our minds. And this slide shows you the direct pipeline from our inner world to our outer actions. The texts say that a mind possessed by this trio, saragam, sadosam, samoham, is the direct origin of all unskillful conduct. It's basically a formula. When delusion is present, which allows greed and hatred to flourish, unwholesome actions are the inevitable result. Now, let's see how this builds, because moha isn't just some internal psychological quirk. The consequences are described in the most dramatic terms you can imagine, with very real-world impact. Okay, one of the most powerful metaphors used in these texts is fire. The world, our entire experience, is said to be ablaze. It's a really vivid image, and it's meant to convey a state of constant agitation, danger, and suffering. And what's this fire made of? The texts name three distinct flames. The world is burning ragagina, by the fire of greed. It's burning dosagina, by the fire of hatred. And, you guessed it, it's burning mohagina, by the fire of delusion. Now think about that. Delusion isn't just one of the flames, it's also like the smoke that prevents us from even realizing we're in a burning building. And if the fire metaphor wasn't intense enough for you, this one is even more chilling. It says when delusion completely overcomes a person, the result is anthatamam, the deepest, most profound darkness. It's a total blindness. It's not just that we can't find the way out, we can't even see the walls of the prison we're in. So what does all this look like in practice? This chart breaks it down. The texts are very specific. Actions that come from delusion lead to harm for yourself, that's atabhyabadhaya. They lead to harm for others, parabhyabadhaya. And very often, they lead to harm for both at the exact same time, ubhyabadhaya. It makes sense, right? A deluded mind just can't calculate the real consequences of its actions, and that leads to suffering all around. Okay, so we have this really intense picture of a world on fire, lost in total darkness. It's a heavy concept, for sure, but this is not a story without hope. If there's a poison, there is absolutely an antidote. The texts are just as clear about the path out of delusion as they are about its dangers. So the direct remedy for moha is amoha, or non-delusion. But this isn't just the absence of something, it's the active presence of its opposite, wisdom, or panya. It's seeing things clearly as they actually are. So the cure for delusion isn't a passive state, it's an active one. So how do we actually cultivate this clarity? The sources point to some very specific practices. The first is developing samadishti, or right view, which is really about making an effort to question our own assumptions, especially about what will truly bring us lasting well-being. The second is cultivating samasati, right mindfulness, the simple, powerful practice of paying attention to your breath, to your senses, without getting swept away by thoughts. It acts like a shield against that creeping fog of delusion. So, what's the result of walking this path? What does a mind actually look like once it's been scrubbed clean of this fundamental confusion? Let's take a look at the final outcome. The outcome is stated with such beautiful simplicity. For one who is panya-vimuttasa, someone freed by wisdom, delusions, moha, simply do not exist. Na santi. They aren't there. Wisdom doesn't just manage delusion, it completely eradicates it. They just can't coexist in the same mind. And this last slide just gives us this incredible metaphor for that final transformation. He dispels all delusion as the rising sun dispels the darkness. The darkness doesn't put up a fight, it doesn't argue. When the sun of wisdom, panya, rises, the darkness of moha simply vanishes. It's a complete and effortless dissolution in the face of light. So the real question this leaves us with is how this ancient concept applies to us, right here, right now. It invites us to ask, what are the subtle delusions that we operate under every single day? You know, the confusion about what will actually make us happy, or the misunderstandings we have about other people. And more importantly, what's one small practical step we could take, not to become a perfect sage overnight, but just to let a little more light in and see our own world a little more clearly.